Law&Crime.
And welcome back to the Law and Crime Network. I'm your host, Amy Dash, joined here by Law and Crime analyst, Julie Rendelman. Thanks for being with me.
Thank you for having me.
So let's just preview what happened this morning. Can you take us through the procedure here? And I think a lot of people may be wondering why Adam Matos was back on the stand.
Sure. So, I mean, obviously the court gave the instructions to the jury about everything that they're supposed to consider when it comes to each of the victims. And that was a pretty long, tedious thing that probably half the people watching may have not been paying full attention, but hopefully the jury was. I think the bigger thing is what just happened, which was that the defense asked for Adam Matos to be able to get back on the stand in order to, it looks like, to preserve the record, because when he testified, the judge did not permit the defense to ask him certain questions because the judge deemed them not relevant for the jury's consideration. Mm-hmm. And so what they wanted to do was they wanted to preserve the record for appeal, and so they had him get on the stand and basically questioned him about those areas that he wasn't allowed to testify. I have to be honest, I've never seen it done that way. If you notice,
how is it normally done?
It's normally done where the defense attorney will get up before the judge and say, Judge, we object to the following things you didn't permit us to ask, and these are the reasons we think they were relevant. I have never seen a defendant get back up when the jury wasn't there to kind of preserve the record. And I don't know if you noticed, the judge wasn't there for what he was saying. So it was a very strange thing, but it's actually an interesting way to preserve the record for appeal.
What could be an advantage of putting him up there on the stand rather than the alternative which you just
I guess the argument would be is that the appellate court can potentially see what, not only that it was relevant because the defense said it was relevant, but that it's coming out through the defendant's own words, and therefore it may give it some level of meaning as to where it fits into Adam's storyline as to his self-defense or any of the defenses that he kind of created. And remember, this is a death penalty case, so perhaps somewhere that fits into something with regards to the appeal.
Yeah, I mean, we know that if he gets the death penalty, he'll probably appeal, and these appeals could go on for decades sometimes.
Correct.
So how does it help on appeal specifically?
So
to preserve the testimony that he wasn't allowed to give during the trial.
It's simple. By the way, whether it's a death penalty case or not a death penalty case, when you have a homicide case or any type of case that goes to a jury and you lose, you're going to appeal.
Right.
And so what this enables...
But you can, just for our viewers, you can only appeal on issues that you've preserved on the record.
Exactly. And so, anytime as a defense attorney when you're trying to appeal a case, you're basically going to pick through the transcript to see where the judge screwed up as far as you're concerned, or did anything that may have prejudiced the defendant's chance to get a fair trial.
Right.
And if these specific questions rise to the level that an appellate court thinks that should have been asked before this jury and weren't, then perhaps he ends up with a new trial. Based on, and it was hard to hear some of the questions, but it seemed like some of the questions were more about kind of his feelings about his son and things that went on regarding that. So I don't know that it rose to the level of getting an
appeal on that
issue.
Basis.
But you have to kind of cover all your bases.
Right, and as we've seen, you can aggregate issues on appeal, whereas one issue may not rise to the level of overturning the conviction or granting a new trial. You can sort of throw everything in. Which do they do that? Do they throw everything in but the kitchen sink, or do you find that people narrow in on a couple things and take their chances that way?
I think it depends on who the attorney is. It depends on kind of who's sitting in the appellate positions, because I think that kind of a smart defense attorney will not just throw in the kitchen sink, because you start to lose credibility with with anyone reviewing it.
Right.
If you're just throwing in nonsense, I think. Although there are certain issues that one may say is, nonsense, but another person may not. So I think that certainly, especially in a case that's as serious as this, you want to cover every possible area where either the judge got it wrong, the prosecutor made a mistake, or anything that may have happened, whether it be the witness's testimony or anything that came in that they think that shouldn't be, and therefore it wouldn't be, a harmless error.
You've been following this trial quite closely. Is there anything that popped out at you where you thought, issue upon appeal, this is something that could that could send him back for a new trial or overturn his conviction?
No, I did. I have to say this was one of those cases where I thought, and I was talking about it with Jessie before, is we're all going to miss the judge because she seemed to do a really fantastic job. I think some were bothered, and I didn't notice this, that the judge was kind of almost making faces when the defendant testified as though she had some negative opinion about what he was saying. I didn't see it, and I think that that would be something that would be room for interpretation, although we do obviously have video, which allows even a higher court to review it. But I really thought she did a fantastic job of keeping the case and the witnesses and the attorneys in control and kind of following the rules as she should have.
So yesterday, it was a shocking day for everybody when Adam Matos took the stand and basically put forth this brand new defense of self-defense. And this was something that a lot of people didn't expect. It was a surprise to see him get up there. But to me, it didn't seem like it was a very refined theory of self-defense. He wasn't careful in how he was speaking. I think a lot of things that he said popped out at people, and they were like, well, he could be convicted just upon the basis of that admission that he made. And he made several admissions. Do you think it was possible for him to be more careful when putting forth this theory, or was it just a catastrophe to begin with?
Look, it's a weird thing, again, because we didn't know what was going to happen. We didn't know what the defense was going to be because they didn't open initially. So we were and the prosecution didn't know. So the prosecutor had to kind of cover every possible defense that he could throw at them without knowing specifically what it was. I didn't like him on the stand. I don't think the jury likes him at all.
Why didn't you like him?
I think he was completely unremorseful. I think I think one of the things that seemed to bother me, and I don't know if it stands out, and perhaps because I'm the mother of 2 kids, is the idea that throughout this whole thing, he almost made it sound as though he was protecting his son. Like, that he wanted to make sure that his son was in the room so that he wasn't affected negatively. Meanwhile, he had killed 4 members of, or 3 members of this child's family.
Quite brutally.
And so I found it so incredibly offensive hearing from him. But I do think that he at least created some question. I don't believe that the jury believes him wholehearted, but at least he raised some doubt about exactly how at least 3 of the murders went down. And that question, to me, is enough for a jury to maybe go from murder 1 to murder 2 or manslaughter.
But then we were talking
but not self-defense
as
far as I'm concerned. But I could be wrong.
But then with regard to Margaret Brown, the 4th person who he killed hours later when she got back from her job, you felt that was not believable, you said.
Well, he doesn't really articulate a self-defense. I mean, there is
it's more
actually
of a paranoia theory.
He doesn't have any self-defense when it comes to her. He actually admits to brutally killing her, and I guess the only thing he's trying to deny is that he made it sound like he put the plastic bags over her head after she was dead to stop the bleeding, to almost make it sound like that his crimes were less horrendous because you can't get more horrendous than beating someone and then putting a plastic bag over the head to cause them not to be able to breathe anymore. So, but there was nothing. There seemed to be no defense other than perhaps a jury viewing that he was not of his right mind at the time he was doing it, and therefore maybe falls into that kind of depravity issue of murder too.
Right, though when you see him on the stand, he doesn't exhibit any signs really that he's not capable of logical thought or reasoning. He doesn't come off like he has some sort of a mental disorder on the stand.
I thought he did. Yeah, I thought that I've always thought that there were.
But not to the level of mental insanity is what I'm saying. The legal standard
correct,
of not knowing the difference between right and wrong. Right. Because he was processing the questions and answering them directly.
But that's not what the standard is for the lesser included. They have never raised a mental disease or defect in this case. And so had they, we would have heard from doctors from the start.
Right.
In regards to even the prosecution saying he is completely of right-minded to do it. Instead, he's trying to kind of get some mitigation or get a break from the murder ones by articulating kind of that he was in this kind of shock or fit or didn't realize what was going on at the time it was happening. I think he came off rather flat and rather peculiar, which fit kind of the person we know who stays in the home, cleans up, remains to order pizzas and sell off TVs and dogs and all those things. So he almost fit who I kind of perceived him to be as an incredibly peculiar, unremorseful, unrepentant man.
Right, and certainly it's odd behavior, but did you get the sense that he's somebody who could commit a calculated crime?
Yes, I think there.
So if there's calculation there, then you know the difference between right and wrong because you're making decisions in furtherance of the crime.
Right,
is
but
is that an argument that is plausible?
Well, remember, the murder one talks about premeditation, and so there's fine lines between the various counts that the jury has to consider. And so the thing that raises a problem for the prosecution in this case, at least as it comes to the 3 victims before Margaret, is the fact that the boyfriend brought a gun, and we believe that to be true based on what he had told someone and the fact that it had been recovered. And that gun being there does cause some issues for the prosecution in terms of proving beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant had a premeditation to kill each person in that house. With that said, it seems like if we go back a little bit and we look at his actions before, which is the attack on his wife, the attack on her with the knife initially where she called 911, the incessant texts and calls to everybody that immediately stopped, there seems to be almost like, and I don't know if this helps or hurts when it comes to murder one, a boiling of the defendant as he comes back to the home, to me, with the intent to kill anybody there.
Right, and also the premeditation can happen in the course of those hours that he's in the house.
It can happen in the course of a moment. Remember, there's no specific law that requires premeditation to happen at any period of time before, other than the one word, which is chance to reflect. And so, yes, it could definitely fall. I think it definitely...
Certainly there's a chance to reflect when Margaret Brown is coming home
there's
hours
no
later.
Question that when he kills her, as far as I'm concerned, there's nothing other than the scenario of a murder one. I think the others, each one separately has their own questions. I certainly think there's a major issue with the woman upstairs because I'm still confused as to what he was doing in any way, shape, or form that was self-defense when it came to her, when we all know that she was holding a phone in her hand at the time he killed her. I mean, he tried to articulate that she yelled to the father at one point, kill him, kill him. And by the way, that might be true if we can accept that he came in to kill everyone, and so she was there trying to protect everyone, including her own child. But I can't see any basis whatsoever for self-defense with regards to her either.
And it was quite chilling, I felt, to hear his testimony because, like you said, it was delivered in such a flat, cold way. And you're listening to somebody describe how they brutally murdered 4 people, seemingly, right? I mean, that's the, he's saying it's self-defense, but the way he describes it, it sounds like murder. So do you think that that's the impression that the jury will get, or do you think he has a chance at all on the self-defense?
I don't believe he has a chance on self-defense. A lot of people believe he has a chance. Is it Nick? I'm getting the names mixed up now.
Nicholas Leonard, the boyfriend.
I think if he had a chance of anything, it might be in that area simply because of the questions that the jury has with regards to the gun, and if they believe that the gun that he brought is the gun that was used to kill 2 of the individuals. But I don't believe, look, my sense from him testifying is that he was extremely dislikable. I think, remember, he gave statements before any of this happened. He gave a statement to a news agency of which he pinned it on a stalker that was completely unrelated. This is a guy who's willing to manipulate anybody he speaks to. And I think he is spending a lot of time. By the way, what bothered me the most, and I'm sure his defense attorneys told him to do this, was each time he looked over at the jury, if I was one of those jurors, I would have lost my mind of him looking at me, that kind of act of kind of acting as though you're talking to them, which I found so phony and reprehensible.
And so why throw him up there at this stage?
I think it's interesting, and I actually questioned it before, but I kind of don't mind the move, and I can't speak for why they did it. Did they do it because he demanded it, or did they do it because they thought it was a good decision. I think one of the things that after the prosecution presented their case that a jury is always left with is there are no eyewitnesses to what went down in that house. Everything we know happened before and after. And so at least they gave Adam a chance in front of this jury to put his own spin on what went down in there and to give kind of some level of potential ability for the jury to kind of understand maybe some level of mitigation in kind of what he did. Will it turn them off in the sentencing phase if they find him guilty of any of the murder ones? Yes, but I think that they might be in a better state than they would have been.
But will it help him, or save him, I should say, from the death penalty?
It may, and I look, you know, death penalty and my beliefs about it aside, I admit that I was so troubled by his testimony, and as a former prosecutor, that would be that moment when I get up there and can't wait to just destroy him. And I think, by the way, the prosecutor did a very nice job of doing that. But
a lot of people are saying humanizing someone can help them avoid the death penalty. However, I'm wondering, was his testimony damaging enough to him or delivered in such a aversive way that it could actually compel them to give him death?
I don't know.
Is that a possibility?
It is a possibility. I think it's always a possibility. I think one of the things you have to remember is he might have gotten to one juror. You know what I mean? And that's usually enough.
That's all it takes.
Right. So, you know, not every juror views it the way we do. I think I agree with you that he came off a very cold, flat way and very unlikable. I don't know that every juror is going to see that. And quite honestly, some jurors may say, well, he's not likable, but the question is, did he commit murder one in regards to each of these individuals? At the end of the day, you have 4 individuals that are dead in a house and 1 person alive. And it's hard to believe that he was able to overpower and outmaneuver every single one of them. And that's kind of what the jury's going to be left going, I don't know if I buy this.
Do you think the testimony was damaging in the respect that maybe there was room for reasonable doubt because of what you said? No one knows what happened in that house. But then when he describes in detail his part in everything, does that hurt the defense because it erases reasonable doubt? We know he did it now.
Well, I think I would say comfortably, beyond any doubt, that the jury was going to convict him on all 4 murders in this case. As to the level of the murder, I think there was always a question with regards to Nicholas Leonard and perhaps Mr. Brown, only because of the issues about Nicholas Leonard bringing a gun and perhaps some evidence of some type of struggle. So I think that was always going to be a potential problem, not necessarily something that the prosecutor couldn't overcome, but always going to be an issue. So perhaps there's an argument to be made that the defendant didn't make any headway at all. And so maybe the argument is if he's so dislikable and so unlikable that he really, all he did was leave the jury with a bad taste. I don't know. But again, I think if one juror kind of buys even half of what he's saying, then I think that he has saved himself from murder one, at least with 1 or 2 of these specific victims.
And lastly, before we listen to some of his testimony from yesterday, do you think that there's anything that he said that could help him to, like you said, get a lesser included charge and not first-degree murder?
Well, I think the issue with regards to Nicholas Leonard is the strongest. I think that whole, I mean, look, I always laugh when you hear someone talking about a struggle with a gun and suddenly he was able to overpower him and, you know, get the gun from him. And, you know, I always find it a little bit, the melodrama disturbs me. But I think that is the area that helped him maybe the most. I think, quite honestly, with regards to Megan Brown, I think the jury probably found it incredibly troubling because he even tried to articulate that he didn't shoot her directly, that somehow the bullet like bounced off the wall and hit her, to almost minimize the intent to kill her, where this poor woman was shot point blank. And so I think in certain ways it helped him, and in other ways it may have hurt him.
I think it's safe to say nobody would want you on their jury.
No, I don't think on
You're a tough
either
customer.
side. On either side, I
You
don't
really
think
are.
anyone would want me.
As a defense attorney, do you think that it's possible that the defense attorneys thought things were going so terribly for them that they threw him up on the stand, and this decision was made at the last minute because they decided that the prosecution was just winning? And they didn't think they were going to win.
I think they always knew they were going to win. I think they knew from the minute you knew he was selling off the dogs and the TV and staying in the home with the smell of decomposed bodies, I think you knew you were, I hate to use the word screwed, but I think they always knew that.
So then they would have started with self-defense in the openings.
The issue sometimes, and you may be right, and it may be a tactical decision or it may not be.
I'm thinking
we don't know.
It was a desperate decision.
Well, I think any time you have someone who's facing the death penalty with a case that in terms of some of the facts are this strong, you are in a desperate position. One of the tactics for not presenting self-defense from the start is you do throw the prosecutor off because the prosecutor isn't as prepared for it, and then they're going to have to go back on rebuttal, and they may not cover the things they would have covered on their direct case. So there might have been some motive, and quite honestly, at the end of the day, as we said, they may have kind of seen what happened to kind of see what the prosecutor was weak on and what he wasn't. And keep in mind, the defendant's in the courtroom the entire time, and the defendant and the defense attorneys are listening to any holes in any of the witnesses' statements. And so what the defendant naturally does is he gets up there and tries to fill in those holes. And so while it seems unfair because the defendant's sitting there the whole time, he has a right to do that, and kind of that enables him to kind of manipulate by bringing this out so late in the game.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. Let's listen to some of that chilling testimony from yesterday, and then we'll come back and we'll dive into it piece by piece.
How many bedrooms were being slept in?
3 bedrooms.
And did the house face south?
Yes.
Now, who slept in the master bedroom on the west side of the house?
Craig and Margaret?
Greg and Margaret Brown?
Yes.
I'm going to refer to this room as Greg and Margaret's room, okay?
Okay.
Who slept in the southeast bedroom on the east side of the house, closest to the front door?
Megan and I?
I'm going to refer to this as Adam and Megan's room, okay?
Okay.
How close is this room, Adam and Megan's room, to the front door?
About a few feet?
Just a few feet?
Yes.
Who slept in the northeast bedroom on the east side of the house, farthest from the front door?
Tristan?
I'm going to call this Tristan's room, okay?
Yes.
Tell us about the lock on Tristan's bedroom when you were there in August of 2014, before this incident.
When we moved there was just a simple doorknob with a simple lock that you could lock from the inside.
If the lock had been changed after August 28th of 2014, who would have done it?
It would have to have been Nick or Megan.
Now, the 2 bedrooms on the east side of the house, they were separated by a bathroom, correct?
Yes.
This neighborhood at 7719 Hatteras Drive, are there woods around and close to that neighborhood?
Yes.
Do you ever hear gunshots?
Yes.
How often?
Often, on a regular basis.
Just during the day or?
Day and night.
Now, Megan was Alice and friends on the night of August 27, 2014, correct?
Yes.
We're going to talk about that a little bit later. But right now, I want us to concentrate on August 28, 2014. Okay? Approximately what time did Megan Brown get home on August 28, 2014?
Around 5:30 a.m.
Has she been out all night long?
Yes.
Were you worried about her?
Yes.
Were you angry?
Yes.
Why?
I was angry about a phone conversation that I had with Nicholas Leonard. He let me know that he was having an affair with Megan and that she was a whore and that he didn't want her anymore.
Sustained.
Should you put your approach?
Certainly.
You said you talked to Nicholas Leonard and he advised you what, without getting into things like that?
He just let me know that he didn't want anything to do with her and he was done with her. He didn't want to be a home wrecker, and that he was done with her.
Now, did he advise you that there was an incident that happened at the time he called you?
Yes.
And did he seem still upset about that?
He seemed upset that there was an incident that occurred that night at the bar.
And did he tell you that it had just occurred
Yes.
right when he called you?
He called me as he was leaving the bar, getting into a cab.
And tell us about what information he gave you.
Objection, Judge, hearsay.
Sustain.
Judge, if I may.
Want to approach?
Please. Based on your conversation with Nicholas Leonard, did you believe that he and Megan would be together?
I guess, I mean, it seemed that they were intimate, so it seemed that something was going on between them.
Right. Did you believe that they would be together after that conversation with him?
From the
Mr.
way,
Matos, you got to keep your voice up just like everybody else. If you have to move the chair up, that's fine, or the microphone. There you go. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
it seemed like from after that day, they wouldn't be together.
You're also did you and Megan get into an argument when she got home at 5:30 in the morning?
Yes, we did.
What was the argument about?
It was about the phone conversation that I had with Nicholas Leonard.
And tell us what happened.
When she came home, I asked her if she was having an affair with Nicholas Leonard. She told me that she wasn't. And when I asked her about it, she denied it. And she said that Nicholas was stalking her and that he followed her to the bar.
Without getting further into that conversation, did she lead you to think that there was nothing between her and Nicholas Leonard?
Yes, she said there was nothing going on between them.
Did you believe her 100%?
I didn't know what to believe.
Tell us what happened after that.
I got upset, pulled out a knife, and I asked her
Where'd you get the knife from?
from the kitchen. I asked her what was the truth. I just wanted to know the truth. I didn't want to hurt her. She tried to grab the knife out of my hand. She cut herself on a finger. And once I saw that she had cut herself, I put the knife down on a dresser. Tristan just woke up. So I left the house and I took my bike and I went up the road northeast.
Did you pull the knife out to hurt her?
No,
Why did you pull the knife out?
I just wanted the truth. I was upset. It was just a stupid thing to do.
Did you ever put the knife to her throat?
No,
At no time did you scratch or hurt her throat in any way?
no,
And you never put it up to her throat?
no,
You said that she grabbed the knife.
yes,
Did you expect her to do that?
no.
Where did you go?
I went northeast up the road behind a house that was empty, and I just laid down and was just chain smoking, just cooling off.
Were you riding a bicycle?
Yes.
And welcome back to the Law and Crime Network. I'm your host, Amy Dash, joined here by Law and Crime analyst Julie Rendelman. Julie, we were just listening to some testimony from yesterday. Adam Matos took the stand and put forth this theory of self-defense, that he used self-defense with regard to the killing of 4 people. We were talking a little bit about how there was a long passage of time between him killing 3 people, his ex-girlfriend, and her brother, and her father rather, and a man that was believed to be her boyfriend. But then her mother comes home hours later. Give me a breakdown on how do you think he will be charged? If you were on this jury, how would you charge him with regard to the first 3 killings and that final killing?
I don't know. You know, look, I think
Crystal ball right now. That's
I'm
the
gonna
game we're
go
playing.
with. God, I hate to do this. I'm going to go with murder one as to Margaret Brown, which is the. Again, by the way,
And tell me why for each one.
I think he has absolutely no defense whatsoever to her death, other than, you know, quite honestly, if I was as a juror, view it as, you know, she's kind of the last piece of the puzzle in terms of individuals that he cannot keep alive, potentially.
And obviously,
so,
killing somebody who may be a witness
Correct.
does not fit into self-defense.
So he's not. He doesn't articulate any rational, reasonable view of self-defense with her. So I think that, you know, I think to me, I think certainly murder one. I mean, maybe murder two, but I think that one is probably the most airtight with regards to murder one.
And now theoretically, with regard to Margaret Brown, because of all the time that passed, he could have dumped the bodies, cleaned up a little bit, and gotten the heck out of there. But does the lying in wait contribute to the premeditation?
It does, although remember, you know, some of the arguments that were made, that were put forward, was that she was killed first. Remember, there was a whole issue with regards to when the shots were fired, and, you know, witness hearing the shots at a period of time that made it sound as though perhaps Margaret was shot or Margaret was killed before everybody else.
But he debunks that.
But he does, if you accept it to be true. I mean, who knows? And I don't quite honestly know that it fully matters. I guess from the perspective of kind of the intentional premeditation, then maybe it is stronger if she's the first one killed, because there's absolutely no motive to have killed her. In terms of Nick, I think we're looking at probably more of a murder one or murder two or manslaughter. And with regards to the father and the ex-girlfriend, I'm going to guess we're talking about murder two, perhaps.
And with regard to the manslaughter for Nick, this is one of those circumstances where there's a suspected romance. We've always heard of that very generic scenario where you have somebody comes home and finds their wife or their girlfriend with another man, and all of a sudden, in the heat of the moment, all of this passion arises,
Right.
and murder happens, or
Exactly.
a killing that is then later determined to be manslaughter.
Right.
Is that the justification for why you would give Nicholas?
Yeah,
the second?
except the one thing that hurts him with regards to that is by claiming complete self-defense with regards to that, then the jury's not as open to considering, if they don't accept self-defense, they may not be as open to considering that kind of crime of passion, because he's refusing to admit that it was a crime of passion. And so if he's
So
not
would that
admitting
have
to
been a better strategy?
you know, maybe, and maybe, who knows? I mean, because remember, the one thing he has going for him is that Nick brought the gun. And so that is kind of where I think he tries to fit that in. He doesn't, I don't think he's capable of kind of making up the self-defense when it comes to the father and when it comes to his ex-girlfriend. And quite honestly, I mean, you know, he uses kind of that argument that the father was going into a closet to get a weapon. Well, he's allowed to go into a closet to get a weapon when he is in fear for his own imminent safety. And, you know, to me, it feels more like a scenario where he knew who was in the house or had a feeling who was in the house and came in there with the intent to kind of deal with whatever, deal with it in the rage he dealt with. And when I use that, that starts to, again, go back and forth between kind of murder one or murder two or manslaughter. So,
but when you talk about his description of his perception of how things were, who was going to hurt him, his paranoia with regard to Margaret Brown when she came back later, does that matter when he's claiming self-defense?
well,
The psychological perception
the
of
issue
the
is
person.
a reasonable person in that scenario, and so I don't know that there's no way that a reasonable person in that scenario is going to view Margaret Brown as a threat. I mean, there's just nothing about the fact that she's coming home from work in her work outfit and that it's going to come to that level. It makes absolutely no sense. In terms of the other
And
stuff,
also the fact that he had an opportunity to leave if he feared something.
absolutely, he had an opportunity to leave at many different scenarios, including when Greg, in terms of the death of Greg Brown, he had the opportunity to leave as well. And
But when he
chose
says
not
he
to.
feared for Margaret Brown harming him, he could have left.
Well, it's absolutely preposterous to have any fear that Margaret Brown would have hurt him. She had no weapon. She was coming from. She was still in the outfit she had worn to work. I mean, I think the only thing that the prosecution kind of called him out on was that she wasn't even wearing her shoes at the time that her body was found. So I think that I think that aspect of it is preposterous, and I also think I think he's not being forthright, because remember, he's trying to get the jury to believe somehow that things were good with his girlfriend, and we know they weren't, and he's trying to paint this picture that everything was kind of hunky-dory, and it wasn't until kind of this, he almost makes it sound like this clan decides that they want him dead out of nowhere, and suddenly he's in danger, which makes absolutely no sense based on what we know had transpired earlier that day.
Exactly. The incessant calls, the incident with the ex-girlfriend where the police were called.
Exactly.
Twice.
Exactly, where I believe they came to the home and I think he had already left, at those different points. And I think, and again, anything I say kind of makes me go, well, maybe this fits into that high idea of crime of passion. But I think he was boiling and out of control boiling.
Yeah, so arriving to the house and seeing his ex-girlfriend with this new man, Nicholas Leonard, it could theoretically create a crime of passion scenario, right?
Sure.
But what about the fact that the father's there and he becomes a victim? Can it's other family members who are present when someone comes upon their lover with someone else, can that also fit into crime of passion?
I think it can. I think it starts to weaken. Look, there is an argument, there's a cooling off period, and I guess if he's there during this whole course of events, then, there is, I guess, an argument to be made that each death at that time is a crime of passion, although one would even argue that the moment that Nicholas Leonard is dead, that the cooling off period should have begun, because the person who he has his most ire towards is no longer in the picture.
Though a lot of times it can be the ex-girlfriend.
It can be. It can be.
Even more so than the person she's with. I agree.
But one of the odd things, if you remember, that he describes, which still to me is he articulates as though once each person is dead, that he goes back to Nicholas and starts to beat him on the head with a hammer, in anger when he's dead, which again kind of goes to the level of him being not right in the head if we accept it to be true, and also kind of so violently angry at the moment that these events are happening.
And that sounds to me like it would support a crime of passion or a temporary insanity defense.
I agree with you. I agree, and that's why I'm kind of stuck when it comes to kind of that area. I don't believe that they're going to accept self-defense. I hope they don't, and I'm sorry to have to give that opinion, but I don't believe him, and I don't think what he said in regards to that is wholly credible. Obviously, it's for the prosecutor to prove beyond a reasonable doubt, but I admit I'm having trouble with the self-defense. But yes, I think that the jury has a lot of thinking to do when it comes to at least the three individuals upstairs.
Now, when we talk about crime of passion legally, does it have to happen when the person enters the house upon the discovery, or do all of the events leading up to him coming upon the house, the calls, the visit to his ex-girlfriend, can that all factor in?
They can factor in, and I don't remember I heard the specific law in this state. I don't remember the specific wording, but yes, it can all be incorporated. Not everyone's crime of passion is the same level of time than someone else's. It's not always the scenario where you walk in and find two people in bed together and you kill them. Sometimes that crime
not like the movies.
No, sometimes that crime of passion could be something that develops over a period of time. But I think that the jury is less inclined to buy it if the time period is longer.
Because we were just covering the Luis Toledo trial, and something very similar. He's got a wife who is cheating on him with a coworker.
Right.
And he discovers it over a period of time where he comes upon the text messages, then he confronts them very angrily in the workplace, and then later on in that day, many, many hours later, he ends up killing her.
And then killing the two
children.
Right.
So I think it's important to sort of flesh out for our viewers that you can still be found guilty of a crime of passion.
Yes.
Which would lessen the charge that you would have to the sentence rather that you would have to face, even if you discover an affair over weeks, months. Is there a time limit?
I don't know that there is a legal time limit. I think that it's up to the jury to make a determination as to whether or not the moment he's committing the crime he's acting in the crime of passion that fits the charges that the judge is instructing him on. And so I don't think there is a specific time, period. Although, again, I think that anytime, if I'm just angry for the next 3 years because my husband cheated on me and I decide to kill him 3 years later, we're going to have some trouble believing that it was a crime of passion. We're going to think that there was premeditation because now I've really had a chance to cool down and instead I've made a decision to kill him. I mean, I'm being sarcastic when I say 3 years. So obviously this all goes into the jury's kind of thinking as to whether or not this really is that heat of passion, or is it something more than that?
It would seem, though, especially with the Luis Toledo scenario, that if you have hours, that should be enough of a cooling off period. Hours.
Well, it depends on what does that mean? You know what I mean? Sometimes, look, everyone's buttons are different, and people explode in different ways, and people sometimes don't immediately explode. They explode at a later period of time. The jury didn't buy the Luis Toledo scenario, and they found him guilty. Mm-hmm. I believe they found him guilty of the intent, if I remember correctly. I believe so. But
they recommended life without parole.
Right. So I don't, again, every case is different. I think the jury is dealing with a lot with this guy because I think that, remember, even with this crime of passion, they're also viewing the defendant, who in and of itself seems just such a bizarre character. That they're probably trying to figure out kind of who is this person and what pushed him to commit all these murders.
Exactly. So when you talk about somebody who's in the heat of the moment, what happens when they're purchasing items or there are some signs of planning? How do you reconcile that legally when you have someone who's angry over something, but they're also taking steps toward a calculated killing?
Well, there's two different things. There's taking steps beforehand and there's taking steps after. So if you're buying...
To cover up.
Correct. So if you're buying a shovel afterwards, that doesn't necessarily mean that you did not act in heat of passion at the time you committed the crime. It just means now you realize you screwed up and you're doing those things that are going to protect yourself. And that's kind of what we see more in this case, not excusing him, but those specific acts seem to be more indicative of someone who knows they did wrong and now is trying to clean up in some way, although still seem to act in such a bizarre...
Cover up and linger.
Bizarre way, which
unique.
I think none of us will ever really understand what went into this individual's mind after the killings of these individuals.
Well, so let's listen more into what was going through his mind, and let's toss back to his testimony from yesterday when Adam Matos took the stand in his own defense.
Why did you leave?
I just wanted to give her some space, just get away from the house.
Were you able to cool off?
Yes.
Did you see law enforcement arrive at their house?
I saw law enforcement driving in that general direction towards the house.
Did they leave?
I couldn't see from that angle.
What did you do?
I stood there most of the day just sleeping, chain smoking.
Now, by the way, let me go back just a little bit. Was Nicholas Leonard there when Megan got home in the morning?
No, it was not.
Was he there when you left the house?
No.
Was he there when you guys were arguing?
No.
Did you decide to return to the house at 7719 Hatteras Drive?
Yes.
About what time was it?
Between 6 and 7 p.m.
Still light outside?
Yes.
Why?
I wanted to get my things. I didn't have anything on me, so I just wanted to get my belongings. I wanted to see if I could say goodbye to Tristan and possibly work things out with Megan.
What time did you go inside approximately?
A little after 6.
And what door did you use to go inside?
The east entrance.
That one that goes into the east garage area, or the stairwell?
Yes.
It's the only door on the east side of the house, right?
Correct.
Was the door open?
It was wide open, yes.
I didn't ask you earlier, but about how many dogs were in this house on Hatteras Drive?
20 dogs.
Describe them for me. Small dogs, large dogs?
Small to tiny.
How often do these dogs bark?
all the time.
How would you describe their bark?
Loud. They were barky dogs.
Did you hear them bark as you went up the stairs?
Yes, I did.
Where are the dogs kept in the house usually?
In the dining room area.
Is that downstairs or upstairs?
That's upstairs.
Okay. How far from yours and Megan's bedroom, approximately?
About 10 feet.
Now, as you walked up those stairs, did you have a gun in your hand?
No,
A knife?
no,
A bat?
no,
A hammer?
no.
What, if anything, did you have in your hands?
Nothing at all.
Tell us again what were you going to do inside the house?
I just wanted to get my things, just gather the stuff that I had.
When you had left, did
What I
you
had
bring things with you?
No,
Were you able to do that, get your things?
no,
Was the door to you and Megan's room, was it closed?
yes,
Did you open it?
yes,
Did you step inside?
yes, I did.
Did you see Megan and Tristan?
Yes, as I entered the room, they were just coming out.
Did Nicholas Leonard come up to you?
Yes,
Where did he come from?
he came from the closet area.
Were you able to see where he was coming from as far as any length of time before he got to you?
No, he just came out of nowhere.
Did he reach, I'm sorry, did he grab you anywhere?
He grabbed me by the throat.
And did he reach for a gun?
He reached into his right pocket and he pulled out a gun and he pointed it at my chest.
Did you grab his gun
Yes, I
or his hand?
grabbed his hand and I pointed it towards the ground away from me so he wouldn't shoot me.
Did he seem like he was trying to raise the gun toward you?
Yes,
Did you struggle to stop him from getting the gun pointed at you?
we did. We struggled.
Tell us what happened.
There was a lot of wrestling going on. We were going around the room. We ended up in the corner by the dresser. And I saw a knife on top of the dresser that I used to defend myself. And I stabbed him in the arm a few times. And he released his grip on my throat. And I dropped the knife. And we continued to wrestle around. I was trying to get the gun out of his hands. And we wind up falling on the bed.
Now, when you say bed, was there a actual bed frame, or was it just a mattress?
It was just a mattress on the floor.
Okay. And it was on the floor, you said.
Yes.
How many times did you stab him?
About 3 times.
And you said that you guys fell on the bed, both of you?
Yes.
Let me go back real quick and ask you about this knife. Did you leave this knife on the dresser?
No.
Do you have hunting knives laying around when you have this 4-year-old walking around?
No, I do not.
Are you the type of person to keep a knife on the dresser?
No.
How about under a mattress?
No.
While you guys are struggling, did Nicholas do anything to your face?
He took the inside of my cheek and he started to rip the flesh from the inside out. And he told me, "I'm going to rip your face off."
Did Megan come back?
Megan and Greg stepped into the room. Yes.
And tell us what happened as you guys were struggling on the bed and Megan and Greg come back.
Megan, she screamed out, "Dad, shoot him, Dad."
Did he have anything in his hand? I'm talking about Greg.
A rifle in his hand.
And where was it pointed?
At my chest.
Did Nick do anything when he saw that rifle pointed at you?
He moved out the way. He was still pinning me down, my legs. He
Did
just
you
moved
say-
out of the way so Greg could have a clear shot at my chest.
Did you say anything to Greg?
I asked Greg, I said, "Please, Greg, don't shoot me, Greg. Don't do this, Greg."
Did Greg pull the trigger?
Yes, he did.
What happened?
It misfired.
What was going on after the gun misfired?
He was trying to get it to work again, and he repeated the steps of trying to shoot me again.
Tell me what was going on with Nick while Greg is messing with this gun. Is he getting stronger or weaker?
He seemed to be weakening.
Was he bleeding a lot?
There was a lot of blood. He was bleeding a lot from his arm.
Did Greg ever shoot the gun again the second time?
Yes, he pulled the trigger again.
And what happened?
It was a misfire again.
Tell us what happens between you and Nick Leonard.
As Greg was continuing to try to shoot the gun again, Nicholas loosened his grip on his gun, and I was able to get it out of his hands.
Did you or him shoot the gun
Yes, a shot went off towards the wall.
while you guys were struggling for the gun?
Yes.
And you said it went toward the wall?
It went through the wall.
Did it put a bullet hole through the wall?
Yes.
Tell us, was there a second shot?
Yes. As I grabbed the gun, I shot it towards Nicholas.
Was Nick still bleeding from the stab wound?
Yes, he was.
Did you later find that bullet from shooting that gun the second time?
Yes, I did.
What'd you do with it?
I threw it in the trash bag.
And was that the one that was found in the garage, west garage?
No. The one that I found that I thought that hit Nicholas Leonard, I found behind the bed.
Okay. And did you end up putting that in the trash?
Yes.
While you and Nick are struggling, Greg has shot the gun twice, wasn't able to get it to kill you.
Yes.
What happened with Greg and Megan?
They ran back to his bedroom, the master bedroom.
Did you know what was in that master bedroom?
He had a bunch of weapons in his closet.
Did you chase after him?
Yes.
Why?
I felt that he was going to get another weapon and try to kill me.
When you got to the master bedroom closet, what was Greg doing?
He was attempting to load another weapon.
What did you do?
I shot him in his lower back as he was trying to turn around with his weapon.
Did he go down then, or did he turn around?
No, he had the weapon in his hand, and I shot him again.
Did he go down then?
Yes.
As you leave the master bedroom closet, tell us what happens next.
As I was leaving the closet, I could see someone in my peripheral, and it was Megan, and I thought she had something in her hand, and I just reacted and I shot her.
Where was she at?
She was by the door around a corner.
And did she have something in her hand?
Yes.
What was it?
I later found it to be a cell phone.
How many times did you shoot her?
One time.
And was it around where that bead was in the master bedroom?
Where the bullet hole was in the corner of the wall.
What did you do then?
I lost it completely. I just realized that I killed the woman that I love, the mother of my child. And at that point, I realized that Tristan no longer had a mother. He no longer had a grandfather. And he no longer had me. And at that point, I felt like my life was over.
Were you angry at all?
Yes, I was very angry.
Did you place that anger on any particular individual?
Nicholas Leonard.
Why?
I was upset that he brought a weapon into my home, that he tried to kill me. He turned my family against me and tried to have them kill me as well.
What'd you do?
I went back to my bedroom, and he was just lying on the bed, and he was unconscious, and I was just upset, and I was just yelling out why this had to happen. I grabbed a hammer that was on the floor, and I just kept hitting him until I couldn't anymore.
How many times do you remember hitting him with that hammer?
I can't remember. It was a lot of times.
Was it always with the end of the hammer necessarily that you put the nails in?
It may have slipped when I was hitting him.
And welcome back to the Law and Crime Network. I'm your host, Amy Dash, and I'm joined by Law and Crime television analyst, digital analyst, Julie Rendelman.
Hi.
We were just listening to Adam Matos talk about how he went back and pummeled Nicholas Leonard with a hammer after he was dead. What relevance does this have with regard to the charges, if any?
I mean, I guess one would argue that if he was still alive and he continued to pummel him, then perhaps there's some level of, in terms of the nature of that crime, makes it way more horrendous that he continues to beat him,
which
while
would
he's
also
still alive,
help
but adds to, in terms of death, but in terms
the death
of pain
penalty
and all those torture kind of a scenario.
Right.
I guess one would argue that if he's dead already, then inflicting pain on someone who's no longer alive is not really inflicting pain. Perhaps the reason he's saying these things is because A, he has to explain why it is that Nick is so badly beaten, and so he doesn't want to admit to the jury that he's still alive when he does it. And at the same time, beating him when he's dead may also articulate kind of that crazy emotion, that comes into the kind of issue, dealing with the idea of, the manslaughter kind of argument.
Yeah, so it does two things. It bolsters the crime of passion theory, even though he's claiming self-defense. He's not really claiming crime of passion, but it also helps to mitigate with regard to the sentencing phase if he's convicted. The death penalty, an aggravating factor, is that the victim suffered, that it was a cruel, heinous, atrocious killing. Right. And so by him getting up there and saying he was dead, he's trying to mitigate that, because if he were alive, he would have been suffering if he's being pummeled with a hammer.
And if he's alive and
Right.
he's still being beaten, that's not self-defense.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
So he has to articulate that he's dead at the time he's doing it to protect his defense.
But the reason is because with self-defense, you have to exert the amount of force that is proportionate to what you feel threatened by.
Right, and clearly if someone's already down on the ground, which we know they were, then he's gonna have a lot of trouble articulating that he's in danger at that time, because while you can use force against someone, once the force back at you is gone, you can't continue to use it.
Exactly. He was very robotic.
That's right.
Does that indicate to the jury that this is something that has been rehearsed by him and his defense attorneys?
That's a great question. I don't know the answer. Look, anytime you have a situation, and which is in this case, I noticed, I don't know if you did, that it seemed the defense attorney was talking more than the defendant, meaning that the defense often was asking him yes/no questions and kind of pushing him into certain avenues. You start to kind of question how prepared, or is he too prepared between himself and his attorney. I think as a jury, you'd rather hear a defendant just talk, so you can believe or make a decision as to how credible he is. They may not like that idea as a defense attorney, because they may think the more he talks, the more he digs himself deeper. But I definitely think the jury, no matter what they decide, had to have been turned off by the nature of how he testified.
And with regard to the other testimony that we've heard, how much weight do you think his testimony will have with the jurors versus some of the other people that took the stand?
I think he has a lot of weight for the simple fact that he's the only one that's there when the actual shootings happened, or when the actual murders took place. And so obviously I think they have to take what he's saying into some consideration so they can get some feel as to what potentially happened inside. However, I think the jury, and I think it's important and imperative for the prosecutor to make it clear that some of the most defining evidence about really what went down inside of that house is not what he says, but kind of the other evidence that surrounds it, including the 911 call that she made that articulates that she was in danger hours before this all happened, the text messages that he had sent that the friend was able to articulate, Megan's friend was able to articulate kind of the danger that Megan felt she was in based on those texts. And then, you know, some of the other evidence, including kind of his actions of buying a shovel, disposing of the bodies, and all those things that I think speak volumes in regards to what went down in the house. And the medical examiner, who I think plays the most vital role because he's able to articulate for the jury not only where the injuries took place, but but how they took place.
And with regard to his testimony, he says at one point he thought the affair would end.
Right.
That stuck out to me because maybe when he came upon this home and he sees that they're still together and actually seeing them in the flesh together, Nicholas is there. Presumably, from what we've heard, he's brought a gun to defend his love. Meanwhile, this guy comes into the house with his ex-girlfriend, her parents. They were once his family. Seems like the new man now has assumed his role of being the protector of the house, and that would anger him. How will that play into everything? Do you think it's believable that Nicholas went there with the gun because of what had happened earlier in the day, prepared when Adam were to come back to the house to say, get out of here or I'm going to kill you?
Absolutely. I think you're right. And I think you just kind of gave the defense's arguments for the kind of the situation of the manslaughter that we're talking about, which is losing kind of the fact that his role in the family, and now he has Nicholas there with his significant other along with her parents, you know, and so that kind of sets the stage for that blow up to happen. But yeah, I think Nicholas was there to protect her and you know, because he believed she was in dire danger, and he was absolutely right, because at the end of the day 4 people were killed. And so yeah, I think that, you know, he did what he thought was right to try to protect her. The question really becomes, would they all be dead right now if not for that gun coming into the picture? And my answer is yes.
And the problem always with the self-defense theory is, who was the aggressor? That's the question, right? Because Nicholas may have been there with the gun in self-defense in case Adam came in and he was the aggressor, but Adam's saying he came in, potentially Nicholas was the aggressor. The problem here is, and this is the same thing that we saw with the George Zimmerman trial with Trayvon Martin, the people who are dead can never tell you.
Sure.
So all you have to rely upon is the testimony of the person who was there saying that the dead people are the aggressors. How can you ever rebut that?
Well, you can, because of the surrounding evidence. First of all, some of the things that you have to make a determination as to whether the things that Adam Matos said make sense in regards to how things happened the way they did. You know, when he describes at one point that Nick is holding him and the father is, you know, aiming a gun at him and they're holding him to try to position him to get him shot, I didn't find that credible. I don't know that a jury will. And so if you don't buy that, then the question becomes, why is Adam Matos coming into this jury, looking at them and lying to them? And the answer you're going to give is, well, he's lying because he's protecting himself. And the jury can make a determination that the reason he's protecting himself is because he's guilty of the crimes that he's charged with. But I think that one of the problems he has is, remember, he has committed a crime against his girlfriend prior to him returning to the home. He's aware potentially that the police have been there and the police have left. So he's aware that people don't want him in the home. And so for him to walk in after threatening his girlfriend with a knife and walk in and have some expectation that no one should be there to protect her is kind of, I don't want to say insane, but kind of nuts. So
yeah,
I think he's walking in there with some intent to do some harm to this family at that point.
Now we're going to switch gears a second and toss to a trial in Tennessee.